So British Prime Minister Liz Truss has resigned. She has recently faced pressure after her prominent ministers resigned in her cabinet. Truss has admitted her radical plans went too far and too fast after investors dumped the pound and government bonds. Now, the Prime Minister's administration imploded after she sacked her Finance Minister Kwasi Kwarteng, and then the Home Secretary also stepped down. But let's get a better understanding of what is going on. And joining us now is Wits University Honorary International Relations Professor John Stremlau. What a privilege. Thanks so much for talking to us, Prof. It's great to have you here on the program.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.
All right. So, I mean, I was saying, jokingly, but it's not a joke. There was actually the lettuce story. There was a head of lettuce that was there the day that Liz Truss came in, and Liz Truss, and there was a competition to see who would last longer. Apparently, the head of lettuce has lasted longer, believe it or not. I'd like to know what kind of lettuce that was, but not a long stint, was it?
No, it's the shortest in the history of Great Britain prime ministership, and 6 weeks is an embarrassment, but Britain has gone through several embarrassments since the unfortunate referendum on Brexit, which is a sign that you can't be very irresponsible with regard to having a referendum that gives people an up or down vote. And it just narrowly won 2 or 3 years ago, and it has unhinged the British economy. It complicates their collective effort with Europe and with regard to Ukraine, but more importantly, it's just been devastating for the British economy. They've lost 5% of their overall growth, and it's just been not good at all. And that's what she's paying the price for, and they're not out of the woods yet.
I want to talk to some of the chirps that have been doing the rounds. And I mean, we talk about the fact that it's an embarrassment. Here's one comment that came through. I was just reading them through the Financial Times, and this one says, Liz Truss, her legacy is actually quite impressive. She buried the Queen, the pound, and the Tory party. That's one of the comments that has come through. And then another one coming through, talking to, my son has lived through 4 chancellors, 3 home secretaries, 2 prime ministers, and 2 monarchs. He's just 4 months old. It's crazy. I never thought I'd see this.
No, it's a symptomatic of a democracy that has lost its wheels to an extent. And again, the way that which you have to reconstruct it is for her to step down. That is a commendable step on her part, even though she said she was going to fight till for another round a couple of days ago. But she's now clearing the way. However, let's keep in mind that this is going to be a decision by the Conservative Party. Last time it took several weeks. This time they're going to do it in a week to get a second successor. But the polling data on the Tories, the Conservatives, has been very dismal. Labour is ascending right now. But I think that Sir Peter Hain, who's very friendly to South Africa, wrote a piece down here not so long ago that warned South Africans that they ought to pay attention to this. It is a function of a government that has not been treating the public sector very well, that is tried to cut taxes before they had ways to pay for that cutting. He was saying that if the RET faction or the DA with the shrinking of the government faction or the other EFF would come in, somehow the South African government has got to get more responsible about its public sector and its private sector, and to bring these things into sync. And that's a very, very difficult problem. I know we're not going to solve this morning, but the British mess is a reminder that democracy is hard work.
It really is. And I mean, I think you saw what some of the sentiments are from South Africans, just saying, it's, yes, Liz Truss has resigned, but you don't see that happening here on the African continent. Leaders will stay for years, decades, if they have to, in order to stay in power. But that's just some of the sentiment. I want to just focus a little bit, though, on Liz Truss, who she is, And what's gone wrong? Obviously, when she took over, and this was after Boris Johnson, this was never going to be an easy role. She was the Foreign Secretary at the time, comes in. What happened? I mean, what went wrong?
She was the wrong person for the job, clearly, and at the wrong time. And that's a powerful combination. But, her competitor, the Exchequer Foreign Minister, Finance Minister, or Rishi Sunak, will be back in the mix again. But don't rule out Boris Johnson. There was a report in the London Times yesterday, the day before, that said he is throwing his hat into the ring and may come back. And there are cynics who say that in pushing for Liz Truss, he knew that she would implode and that the party would welcome him back, where his majority in Parliament still ensures that the Conservatives stay in power until 2025. I don't see any easy recovery on the horizon, frankly, but that's another matter. At the moment, Liz Truss just couldn't handle the job and was really irresponsible in her support for the finance minister's radical economic solution, which was spend, cut, and not figure out a way to pay for it, and the markets crashed.
Yeah. It's quite bizarre, what you were saying, and this is the sentiment, that Boris Johnson could be the man back in that job. I mean, would that not be a recipe for disaster if that is what happens?
Yeah, yes, it would. But, Britain has been through an enormous transformation during the Queen Elizabeth's tenure. It's no longer an imperial power. It's a member of Europe. There was reaction among some forces in the Conservative Party that caught on in the former labor areas of the industrial sector that has been on hard times. But the economy was connected to Europe and was moving forward. Now it's stalled. And it's a reminder, I think, to all democracies that a vibrant press, a free press, is critically important to get people debating and engaged. And then also an efficient state operation that's honest and has got some integrity. And the second one is very, very hard to get. But we do have a vibrant private sector here, and the private sector can play a crucial role. And most importantly, we have a vibrant civil society here. And the civil society is the conscience. You mentioned the Electoral Reform Bill. It's going to be the civil society that's going to try to right the wrongs of what this legislation seems to me to offer, but that's another subject. It's just a reminder, however, that democracy requires all of us to put our shoulders to the wheel, and including what you're doing in airing this question this morning.
I want to look at the other options that are available. Obviously, we look at who could be her successor, and we speak to, their names like Rishi Sunak, as you said, Boris Johnson, Kemi Badenoch, and the different names coming on. Even Jeremy Hunt may be in the running. However, there is a sense that there should be a general election. There's also calls for that. Do you think it's possible we could see that happening in Britain?
I think it is, but it's a little hard to forecast right now. And you're right to think about the successor. And you didn't mention Ben Wallace, who is the Minister of Defense. And there is a war raging in Ukraine, and Britain, as a part of NATO, is absolutely essential to all that. They have been consistent throughout. Biden mentioned that. So that while the British sort out their own domestic problems, having someone at the tiller who knows foreign policy as Wallace does may make sense. But all of those candidates that you mentioned are in play, and how they're going to reach a conclusion within a week or by the 31st is a mystery to me, since it took several weeks the last time around, and that was pretty simple. They were down to two candidates, but it seemed simple, but it wasn't. So stay tuned, but you're right to remind everyone about the difficulties of even the most advanced or oldest democracies that are confronted with problems that South Africans debate all the time.
Yeah, and it is. I mean, it's something to witness in a very interesting way, because this is certainly history in the making. But there is talk that if there is a general election, I mean, obviously this all takes time, the Labour Party would be the ones to come out tops. I mean, if surveys are anything to go by, the support, 80 to 20 for Conservatives?
That is the current polling. And again, to quote Peter Hain, Sir Peter Hain, he was reminding South Africans of this reality that Jeremy Corbyn, had the Labour Party been elected with the wrong guy at the head, in his view, it would have been a disaster. Now the Labour Party is settled down a bit, and Sir Keir, who heads it, is going to be a bit more of a formidable candidate, I think, in a national election. And I think Conservatives will know that, but they don't really have too many cards to play right now.
You know, what are the British looking for? You know, it's been a very difficult time, and I'd like to take it all the way back to Brexit, because it just seemed that these were the moments, and very defining moments, where things started to unravel. Let's take it back there. Do you think that was the moment?
Yes, I certainly do. I thought Prime Minister Cameron was crazy to have a referendum on this issue when the public was not well informed. They were subject to, by the way, disinformation, including reportedly by the Russians, who were delighted to see the European Union disintegrate a little bit. And it raised havoc. It's raised havoc with the economy, and it's raised havoc with the politics and the transition that Britain was going through to become more engaged with Europe, where their economic future is and their political future is, and their collective interests of the Europeans are a good reminder to South Africa and to Africa generally that cooperation and peaceful by consensus inevitably trumps imperial or colonial power, and also dictatorship at home. Autocrats seem to offer easy solutions, and Boris Johnson is a populist in that sense. But Brexit was not an easy solution at all, and the reality is waking up and causing British to rethink.
Yeah.
And the Labour is rethought too. So I think a Labour government would be very different from Jeremy Corbyn's.
Yeah, it certainly will. And I mean, just looking at the resignations and the massive high-profile resignations that have taken place, I think it is going to be a very, very difficult and bumpy ride. Also, rumours that King Charles is not really a fan of the Prime Minister either. I think apparently one of the things that he said on meeting her again last week, he said, "Oh, you're back again."
Yes, that did feature in the press. And while Charles, as a royal but without power, has to be very careful not to intrude on the political domain, he does have an agenda, and it is becoming increasingly clear. And he's becoming more formidable than I would have ever imagined when his mother was so preeminent. But again, she played a very useful role in smoothing the way for the British public to accept the decline of the British Empire. Now, who is going to do that for the United States as it deals with increasing multipolarity? Joe Biden is a bit old right now, but he's trying his best to keep things in perspective. But Americans are also vulnerable to a Donald Trump or a Boris Johnson or a Jacob Zuma.
Yeah, this is a thing we need to keep an eye on. And I know that Joe Biden, the US president, did obviously offer support and says the relations, doesn't matter which way, will continue with the UK. I want to just put up a couple of tweets that came through. I know you were watching very closely on our set earlier, but here are some more, Prof, that we can perhaps have a look at. Rakesh saying, it's hot in the kitchen. Oh, yes, it is. Very hot in the kitchen. Ayanda saying, it was not a surprise for me. I was expecting this. We still undermine women. IS in Hout Bay, Cape Town. And another one, Monique, saying, it's a real circus. Imagine letting go of the previous minister over having drinks with colleagues at work. Now they don't like this one for her tax introductions. Our presidents do much worse, and yet the people cling on to them. I don't know which is worse. Evelyn, of Jenny, beautiful ladies, she did the right thing. Because if you can't deliver and citizens are not happy, it is the best to resign. So, John, that's the sentiment from viewers. But yeah, I'm not sure that our political system works this way, does it? Or should it?
Well, should be debated and discussed, and civil society is very outspoken, and we will see a lot of this play out over this question of the electoral law, and does it ensure that one person, in fact, gets one vote, which is at the bedrock of any struggling democracy, and all democracies are struggling. However, I do want to make the point, because there's been a lot of question about the gender issue in this campaign. I think it's really a sign of interest that to South Africans and to every Democrat everywhere, that Britain has, even though the Conservative Party is dominated by white males, and historically has been, it's a very diverse cabinet, and it is changing. And the fact that women could rise and be tested and not succeed. Margaret Thatcher is an idol to Liz Truss, but Liz Truss is no Margaret Thatcher. And I think that's progress, to begin to see people for their abilities and their merit, despite whatever their color is, whatever their gender is, whatever their affiliation is, whatever their sexual preferences is. They are people, and they ought to be judged on their merits.
John Stremlau, always a pleasure. Professor joining us to talk about the resignation of Liz Truss just 6 weeks after she was appointed. Well, we don't really have to feel too sorry for her. Of course, the reputational damage is one thing, and, walking around knowing that you were the shortest ever British Prime Minister, she does still get £115,000 for the rest of her life because she was in that position. That's about 2.5 million rand. So there you go.